I was just finishing my evening jog along the riverside when I heard Tyler's voice cut through the October air like a blade. "Dad! Dad! Stop!" My 12-year-old son was pointing frantically toward Memorial Bridge, his backpack still slung over his shoulder from our walk home from school. That's when I saw her, a woman in an inexpensive Navy suit standing on the wrong side of the bridge railing, her hands gripping the metal behind her as she stared down at the dark water 40 feet below. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My military training kicked in before my mind could fully process what I was witnessing. 8 years in the Army had taught me to assess situations quickly, and this one was crystal clear. I'd seen that posture before, that terrible stillness that comes right before someone makes an irreversible decision. Without thinking, I grabbed Tyler's hand and started running toward the bridge, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Tyler, stay back when we get there," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even as adrenaline flooded my system. "This is important, okay? Just trust me." My son nodded, his eyes wide with understanding beyond his years. Kids who grow up with a single parent learn to read situations faster than they should have to. As we approached, I could see the woman more clearly. She was probably in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in what had once been a perfect bun, but was now disheveled. Her expensive heels were kicked off to the side, sitting abandoned on the concrete. She wasn't crying, that's what struck me most. She looked determined, resolved, like someone who had run out of every other option. The bridge was relatively empty at this hour, just a few evening commuters heading home from downtown Riverside. Cars passed by without slowing, their drivers either not noticing or not wanting to get involved. I understood that instinct, but I couldn't live with myself if I just walked away. I approached slowly, the way I'd learned to approach wounded soldiers in Afghanistan. Sudden movements could trigger unpredictable reactions. "Ma'am," I called out softly, stopping about 10 feet away. "I'm Mark. This is my son Tyler. We're just walking home from school." I kept my voice steady, conversational, like we were meeting at a coffee shop instead of on a bridge where she was contemplating ending her life. She turned her head slightly, and I got my first good look at her face. Even in crisis, there was something commanding about her presence, the kind of natural authority that suggested she was used to being in charge. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, and they held an intelligence that made this situation even more heartbreaking. This wasn't someone acting on impulse. This was someone who had thought this through. "You should keep walking," she said quietly, her voice carrying a slight tremor despite her composed exterior. "This isn't something you want your son to see." Her concern for Tyler, even in her darkest moment, told me everything I needed to know about who she really was underneath whatever had brought her to this point. Tyler surprised me by stepping forward slightly. Not close enough to be dangerous, but enough to be heard clearly. "My dad says sometimes people just need to know someone cares," he said with the simple honesty that only children possess. He says that's what heroes do. They care about people they don't even know. The woman's composure cracked just slightly at Tyler's words, and I saw her grip on the railing tighten. That's when the afternoon sun caught something on my jacket, the small military service pin I always wore, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Her eyes fixed on it, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or just surprise at finding a veteran in this moment. "You served," she said, and it wasn't a question. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. There was something in her voice I couldn't quite identify. Respect, maybe, or curiosity about why someone who had fought for strangers overseas was now trying to save a stranger at home. "Afghanistan, 2 tours," I replied, keeping my voice even while my mind raced through possible approaches. "And you're right, I did serve. But right now, I'm just a dad walking home with my kid, and I can't pretend I don't see someone who might need help." She studied me for a long moment, her grip on the railing loosening slightly. "Jessica," she said finally, as if deciding that if these were going to be among her last words, she might as well use her real name. "Jessica Morrison." The name hit me like a physical blow. I knew that name. Everyone in Riverside did. Morrison Tech Solutions had been all over the local news for months, but not for good reasons. The CEO of Morrison Tech, I said, pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place. You're the woman who's been fighting those fraud charges. Tyler looked between us, sensing the significance, even if he didn't understand the details. I'd followed the story loosely in the papers, mainly because the company employed half the tech workers in our area. Accusations of embezzlement, federal investigations, a company that had gone from local success story to scandal in a matter of weeks. Jessica's laugh was bitter, hollow. Former CEO. As of about 3 hours ago, I officially lost everything. My company, my reputation, my freedom probably, and worst of all, my ability to prove I didn't do what they're saying I did. She turned to face the water again, and I felt my chest tighten with the fear that she might jump before I could understand what had really happened. Who's they? I asked, taking a small step closer. Tyler had moved to my side, his presence both comforting and terrifying in this moment. I wanted to protect him from witnessing something traumatic, but I also couldn't leave this woman alone. My business partner, my former best friend, the man I trusted with everything. Jessica's voice carried a pain that went deeper than financial loss or legal troubles. This was betrayal on the most personal level. Brandon Collins. We started the company together right out of college, built it from nothing into something worth $50 million. I thought we were partners in every sense of the word. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and the distant smell of rain. Jessica shivered, and I noticed she wasn't wearing a coat over her business suit. Whatever had driven her to this bridge, it had been sudden, impulsive despite her current resolve. "What happened?" Tyler asked quietly, his young voice somehow carrying more weight than any adult question might have. Children have a way of cutting through complexity to reach the heart of things. Jessica looked down at my son, and for the first time since we'd approached, her expression softened. "Your son asks good questions," she said to me. "What happened is that I trusted someone I shouldn't have. Brandon had access to everything: company accounts, client information, financial records. Over the past 6 months, he's been systematically stealing money and making it look like I was the one doing it." I felt my jaw clench. As a veteran, I had a particular hatred for people who betrayed trust, who used positions of authority to hurt others. But surely there's evidence, ways to prove your innocence. "That's what I thought," Jessica said, her voice growing stronger as she talked, as if explaining her situation was giving her back some measure of control. "I spent every day for the past 3 months gathering documents, building my defense, working 18-hour days to prove what I knew was true. I had bank records, communication logs, witness statements from employees who'd seen Brandon acting suspicious." She paused, staring out at the water as a family of ducks paddled by below, oblivious to the human drama unfolding above them. "This morning, I was supposed to meet with the federal investigators. I had everything organized, ready to hand over proof that would clear my name and expose Brandon for what he really is." "What changed?" I asked, though I suspected the answer would be devastating. "I got to the office early to grab the files from my safe. Everything was gone. 8 months of evidence, backup documents, recorded conversations. All of it vanished. My office had been cleaned out so thoroughly it was like none of it had ever existed." Jessica's voice cracked slightly. "But that wasn't the worst part." Tyler moved closer to me, his instincts telling him that whatever came next would be difficult to hear. I put my hand on his shoulder, drawing comfort from his solid presence while preparing myself for Jessica's revelation. Brandon was there, sitting in my chair like he already owned the place. He had the nerve to act surprised to see me. Said he'd gotten a call about some kind of security breach, that someone had broken into the building overnight. He was so convincing, so concerned about my safety and the missing files. Jessica's hands tightened on the railing again. That's when I realized how completely I'd been outplayed. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture of manipulation that went far beyond simple theft. "He made it look like you destroyed the evidence yourself," I said. "Worse than that. He had security footage showing someone who looked like me entering the building at 2 in the morning. Someone wearing my coat, using my access card, going straight to my office. The footage was grainy enough that you couldn't see the face clearly, but anyone would assume it was me." Jessica's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "He'd thought of everything, even hired someone who matched my height and build." I felt a familiar anger building in my chest, the same righteous fury I'd experienced overseas when I'd seen innocents targeted by those who should have protected them. That's not just theft, that's conspiracy, fraud, evidence tampering. There have to be ways to fight this. With what money? Brandon froze all the company accounts pending the investigation. My personal assets are tied up in legal holds. I can't even afford a decent lawyer anymore, and the public defender they assigned me took one look at the evidence against me and suggested I take whatever plea deal they offer. Jessica's composure was starting to crack, the weight of her situation becoming visible in the slump of her shoulders. Tyler looked up at me with those serious eyes that had seen too much for his age. "Dad, remember when you told me about Lieutenant Rodriguez? How he didn't give up even when everything looked hopeless?" I felt a surge of pride in my son, even in this terrible moment. He was referencing a story I'd told him about a fellow soldier who'd been wrongly accused of abandoning his post, but who'd fought for months to clear his name. "Tyler's right," I said to Jessica. "Sometimes the fight seems impossible, but that doesn't mean it's not worth fighting." "You don't understand?" Jessica said, turning away from the water to face us fully for the first time. "It's not just about the money or even the criminal charges." Brandon made sure this story hit every major business publication in the region. Morrison Tech is my father's legacy. He started the company 40 years ago and built it into something he was proud of. He died 2 years ago thinking I would carry on what he'd created. Her voice broke completely now, the tears finally coming. "I've destroyed everything he worked for. The employees who trusted me are losing their jobs. The clients who believed in us are pulling their contracts. Even if I could somehow prove my innocence tomorrow, the damage is done. Morrison Tech is finished, and it's my fault for trusting the wrong person." I found myself thinking about the worst day of my military service, when we'd lost 3 good soldiers because I'd trusted intelligence that turned out to be false. The guilt had nearly consumed me until my commanding officer helped me understand the difference between making a mistake and being betrayed by someone who should have had your back. "Jessica," I said, my voice carrying the authority I'd once used to rally demoralized troops. "What Brandon did to you, that's not your fault. Trusting someone isn't a weakness, and being betrayed doesn't make you responsible for the betrayer's actions." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving streaks of mascara on her cheek. "Maybe you're right about the blame, but that doesn't change the reality. In 2 hours, I'm supposed to surrender myself to federal marshals. Tomorrow morning, I'll be arraigned on charges that could put me in prison for 20 years. By next week, everyone I've ever known will believe I'm a criminal." The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed grotesquely beautiful given the circumstances. Other pedestrians had started to notice our small group on the bridge, some slowing their pace, others pulling out phones. I realized we were attracting attention, which could either help by bringing more support or make things worse by adding pressure. What if there was another way? I asked, the beginnings of an idea forming in my mind. What if we could find evidence that Brandon missed, something he didn't know existed? Jessica's eyes flickered with something that might have been hope, but she quickly suppressed it. "There is no other evidence. Brandon was thorough. He planned this for months, maybe years. Every document I had, every backup file, every witness who might have supported me, he either destroyed it or discredited them. But he's human," I pressed, feeling Tyler's hand slip into mine as my son sensed the critical nature of this moment. Humans make mistakes, especially when they think they've won. In Afghanistan, we learned that the most dangerous enemies were often the most overconfident ones. They'd get sloppy because they thought they were untouchable. "Mark, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you don't know Brandon like I do. He doesn't make mistakes. He's been planning my downfall since we disagreed about the company's direction 8 months ago. I wanted to expand our services to help small businesses with affordable tech solutions. He wanted to focus exclusively on high-profit corporate contracts." Jessica's voice grew harder as she spoke about her former partner. "When I insisted we move forward with the small business initiative, he started setting his trap." Tyler looked up at both of us, his young face serious. "My dad always says that bad people think they're smarter than everyone else, but that's what makes them mess up. They get so proud they forget to be careful." Jessica smiled despite herself, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her. "Your son is very wise for his age. But in this case, Brandon's pride is justified. He graduated top of his class from MIT. Built our security systems himself. Knows every loophole in corporate law. He's not just smart. He's brilliant. Brilliant people have blind spots, I said, drawing on my military experience with intelligence analysis. They focus so hard on the big picture that they miss small details. What about surveillance footage from other buildings? Traffic cameras? Security systems he didn't control? The investigators already checked all of that. Brandon made sure the fake footage was the only clear recording from that night. Every other camera was mysteriously malfunctioning or had been tampered with. Jessica's shoulders sagged again. He even had the security guard, who was supposed to be on duty that night, call in sick. Everything was orchestrated perfectly. I felt my frustration building, not just at Brandon's methodical cruelty, but at my own inability to find a crack in his plan. Then Tyler tugged on my sleeve, the way he did when he had something important to say but wasn't sure if it was appropriate to interrupt adult conversation. "Dad, remember last month when you helped Mrs. Patterson find her lost ring? You said sometimes the thing you're looking for is hiding in plain sight, in a place where nobody thinks to look." Tyler's observation sparked something in my mind, a different way of approaching the problem. "Jessica, tell me about the night before everything disappeared. Walk me through your exact routine." I could see her wondering why this mattered, but she seemed willing to indulge what might be her final conversation. "I worked late, as usual. Left the office around 11, went home to my apartment, had some leftover Chinese food, answered emails until about 1 in the morning, then went to bed." Pretty much the same routine I'd had for months while building the case against Brandon. "And your evidence was secure? You're absolutely certain it was there when you left?" "Positive. I actually double-checked the safe before leaving because I was planning to organize everything first thing in the morning for the meeting with investigators. Every document was exactly where it should have been." Jessica's certainty was absolute, which made Brandon's theft even more impressive and infuriating. Tyler spoke up again, his child's logic cutting through our adult assumptions. "But if the bad man knew about the safe and knew how to get into your office, why did he wait until the night before the meeting? Why not steal everything weeks ago?" The question hit both Jessica and me simultaneously. She straightened slightly, her analytical mind engaging with the puzzle Tyler had posed. "That's actually a very good point. Brandon had access to my office for months. He could have taken the evidence anytime he wanted. Unless he needed something specific to happen first," I said, following Tyler's line of reasoning. "Or unless he was waiting for the right moment to frame you for destroying it yourself." Jessica began pacing in the small space beside the railing, her business instincts taking over as she worked through the implications. "The timing wasn't random. He waited until the night before my meeting with federal investigators because he needed it to look like I destroyed evidence to avoid prosecution. If the files had disappeared weeks ago, it wouldn't have had the same impact. But that means he was taking a huge risk," I continued, feeling the pieces of a new picture forming. "He had to be absolutely certain he could get into your safe, remove everything, and plant the fake surveillance footage all in one night. That kind of operation requires preparation, backup plans, possibly help from someone else. Brandon always worked alone. He's too paranoid to trust anyone else with something this important." Jessica stopped pacing and looked directly at me. "But you're right about the preparation. He would have needed to know my exact schedule, my habits, even things like what time I typically went to bed." Tyler's eyes widened with understanding. "Like someone who was watching you. My dad taught me about surveillance from his army days. He said people who spy on others have to write everything down or they forget important details." I felt a familiar surge of tactical thinking, the mental shift that had kept me alive in combat zones. "Jessica, in all the months you were building your case, did you ever feel like someone was watching you? Phone calls at odd hours, unexpected visits, questions about your schedule?" "Actually, yes. Brandon started dropping by my apartment more frequently over the past few months. Said he was worried about the stress I was under, wanted to make sure I was taking care of myself. He'd bring dinner, stay for a few hours, sometimes help me organize documents related to the case. The betrayal went even deeper than we'd realized. He was inside your apartment, seeing your routine, learning your security habits, probably even figuring out your safe combination by watching you open it." "Oh my God!" Jessica's hand flew to her mouth as the full scope of Brandon's manipulation became clear. He insisted on helping me organize evidence. Said 2 sets of eyes were better than 1 for catching details. I actually let him handle some of the most important documents. I could see her mind racing through memories, recontextualizing months of interactions through this new lens of understanding. What kind of documents did he handle? Financial records mostly, bank statements, transaction logs, correspondence with clients. He said his background in cybersecurity made him better at spotting digital fingerprints that could prove the money trail. Jessica's voice grew stronger as anger replaced despair. He was learning my entire case while pretending to help me build it. Which means he knew exactly what evidence was most dangerous to him, I said. But Tyler's question still stands. If he had access to everything for months, why wait until the last minute to steal it? That's when mistakes happen, when people get desperate and sloppy. Jessica stopped pacing again, her expression shifting from despair to something sharper, more focused. Because he needed me to believe I still had a chance. If the evidence had disappeared months ago, I would have known I was being sabotaged and started looking for backup plans. By waiting until the last moment, he ensured I'd be completely unprepared and emotionally devastated. But also rushed, Tyler added with the simple wisdom that had been guiding our conversation. When people rush, they drop things or forget to pick them up. I felt the first real spark of hope since we'd started talking. Jessica, when you discovered the evidence was gone, did you immediately assume Brandon had taken it? Or did you consider other possibilities? I knew it was him instantly. There was no question in my mind. Her certainty was absolute, which suggested she'd had suspicions about Brandon before this final betrayal. Then you might have been preparing for this possibility without even realizing it. People who suspect they're being betrayed often take precautions instinctively, even if they don't consciously acknowledge what they're doing. I could see her thinking through this new possibility, searching her memory for actions she might have taken to protect herself. There was one thing, she said slowly, as if afraid to voice hope. About a month ago, I started feeling paranoid about keeping all my evidence in one place. I made copies of some of the most important documents and stored them separately. Tyler practically bounced with excitement. Where did you hide them? That's the problem. I stored them in a safety deposit box at First National Bank. But Brandon knew about that too. We used to keep company documents there when we were first starting out. If he was thorough enough to clean out my office safe, he certainly would have thought to check the bank. My military training kicked in again, the systematic approach to problem solving that had served me well in complex operations. When did you last check the safety deposit box? 2 weeks ago. Everything was still there. Jessica's voice carried a note of uncertainty, as if she was afraid to hope. And Brandon knew you had access to it, but did he know you were actively using it for evidence storage? The distinction was crucial. Knowing about something and knowing it was being used were different levels of intelligence. Jessica's eyes widened as she worked through the implications. No, I never told him about the copies. I felt guilty for not trusting him completely, so I kept it to myself. He knew about the box from years ago, but he wouldn't necessarily know I was using it recently. For the first time since we'd found Jessica on this bridge, I felt genuine optimism. Then we need to get to that bank before Brandon realizes his oversight. If there's evidence he doesn't know exists, evidence he couldn't have tampered with or destroyed, then you still have a chance to fight this. The sun had nearly set, painting the bridge in long shadows that made our small group feel isolated from the rest of the world. But instead of feeling ominous, the approaching darkness now felt like cover, like protection for the plan that was forming in my mind. The bank closed an hour ago, Jessica said, practical concerns reasserting themselves. And even if we could get in, I surrender myself to federal marshals in less than 2 hours. There's not enough time to organize a legal defense. Maybe not enough time for a full defense, I agreed, but possibly enough time to cast doubt on the charges, to show investigators that there's more to this story than Brandon's version. Sometimes all you need is reasonable doubt to buy yourself breathing room. Tyler looked between us, sensing the shift in mood but not fully understanding the complexities involved. Are we going to help her fight the bad man, Dad? I looked down at my son, this remarkable kid who'd insisted we stop to help a stranger, and whose simple questions had uncovered possibilities that adult cynicism had missed. Then I looked at Jessica. This woman who'd been brought to the edge of despair by betrayal, but who was now showing the first signs of hope she'd probably felt in months. "Yeah, buddy," I said, my decision crystallizing as I spoke. "I think we are." Jessica climbed back over the railing with my help, her expensive heels clicking against the concrete as she retrieved them from where she'd abandoned them earlier. The simple act of stepping back onto the safe side of the bridge seemed to restore some of her natural authority, the executive presence that had built a $50 million company from nothing. "I have a contact at First National," she said, pulling out her phone with hands that were steadier now than they'd been in hours. "Maria Santos, the branch manager. We've done business together for years. If anyone could get us access after hours, it would be her." Tyler walked between us as we headed toward my car, his young mind still processing everything he'd witnessed. "Dad, what happens if the documents aren't there anymore? What if the bad man already found them?" "Then we'll figure out another plan," I told him, though privately I was wondering the same thing. Brandon Collins had proven himself to be methodical and thorough. It was entirely possible he'd already discovered and destroyed Jessica's backup evidence. Jessica's phone call to Maria lasted only 3 minutes, but I could tell from her expression that it had been successful. "She'll meet us there in 20 minutes. She's bringing the security supervisor and a notary public. Whatever we find, we'll be able to document it properly for legal purposes." The drive to the bank gave me time to think through what we might be walking into. If Brandon had discovered the safety deposit box, this could be a trap. If he hadn't, we might be about to hand Jessica the ammunition she needed to fight back. Either way, we were committed now. "Jessica," I said as we pulled into the bank's empty parking lot, "before we go in there, I need you to understand something. If this evidence exists, and it's as damaging to Brandon as you think it is, he's not going to just accept defeat. People who are willing to destroy someone's entire life don't usually stop when their first plan fails." She nodded grimly. "I know, but at this point I'd rather face whatever Brandon throws at me than give up without a fight. At least now I have a chance to prove my innocence." Maria Santos was waiting by the bank's side entrance, a petite woman in her 40s with the calm competence of someone who'd handled unusual requests before. She greeted Jessica with genuine warmth and concern, having clearly followed the Morrison tech scandal in the news. "I can give you 30 minutes, Maria said as she led us through the darkened bank lobby. "After that, I have to report this access to the federal investigators handling your case. I won't risk my banking license by hiding anything, but I can make sure you have time to review whatever's in there." The safety deposit box was smaller than I'd expected, but it was packed with documents that Jessica had organized with the same methodical precision she'd once applied to running her company. As she spread the papers across the small viewing table, I could see her confidence growing with each page. "This is it," she said, her voice filled with the first real hope I'd heard from her. Bank records showing transfers that Brandon made using forged authorization codes. Email chains, where he discussed the timing of the thefts with someone else, someone whose contact information he thought he'd deleted from the server. Even photographs of him accessing my office computer after hours. Tyler peered at the documents with the curiosity of a kid who'd grown up hearing his father's war stories about the importance of evidence and documentation. "Dad, look at this picture. The man's wearing gloves, but you can still see his face really clearly." He was right. The photograph showed Brandon at Jessica's computer, apparently unaware that the building's backup security system was still recording, even when the main system appeared to be offline. His face was clearly visible, and the timestamp put him there at exactly the moment when critical files were being deleted from Jessica's accounts. "How did you get these?" I asked, impressed by the thoroughness of her preparation. "I hired a private investigator 6 weeks ago when I first started suspecting Brandon. The PI used to work corporate security and knew how to access systems that Brandon didn't know existed. Most of what we found was circumstantial until now, but combined with the bank records and email evidence, it paints a complete picture of the conspiracy." Maria, who had been quietly observing our discoveries, stepped forward. "Jessica, I need to ask you something important. When you opened this box 2 weeks ago, did you remove anything or add anything to it?" "I added one more folder," Jessica replied. "Why do you ask?" "Because according to our access logs, your box was opened 3 days ago by someone using your authorization, but you just told me you haven't been here in 2 weeks." The room went silent as the implications sank in. Brandon had found the safety deposit box, but instead of destroying the evidence, he'd apparently left everything intact. That didn't make sense unless he'd had a different reason for being there. Jessica's face went pale as she rifled through the documents more carefully. The folder I added 2 weeks ago, it's gone. It contained the original copies of emails between Brandon and his accomplice, including details about how they planned to frame me for the evidence destruction. "So he knows you have all of this," I said, feeling the tactical situation shift around us. Which means he's either confident it won't matter, or he's planning something to neutralize it. Tyler, who had been quietly listening to our conversation, suddenly looked up with alarm. "Dad, if the bad man knows about this place, and he knows we're here, doesn't that mean he might be watching us right now?" The thought hit me like a physical blow. I moved quickly to the small window that overlooked the parking lot, staying to the side to avoid silhouetting myself against the interior lights. What I saw made my blood run cold. A black SUV was parked across the street, engine running, 2 figures visible in the front seats. As I watched, one of them raised what looked like a camera with a telephoto lens, aimed directly at the bank entrance. "We need to leave," I said quietly, my military training taking over. "Now. Maria, is there another way out of this building?" "The service entrance in the back leads to the alley," she replied, immediately understanding the gravity of the situation. "But Jessica, if these documents are as important as they seem, you need to get them to the authorities immediately." Jessica was already gathering the papers, her movements quick and efficient. "The federal marshals I'm supposed to surrender to, they're supposed to be clean, not connected to Brandon's network. If I can get this evidence to them before my surrender time, they'll have to investigate. Assuming we can get out of here without Brandon's people intercepting us," I said, checking the window again. The SUV hadn't moved, but I could see additional vehicles positioned at other exit points from the parking lot. "This is a coordinated surveillance operation. They're not just watching, they're ready to move." Tyler stayed close to my side as we prepared to leave, his trust in my ability to handle dangerous situations both comforting and terrifying. I was responsible not just for Jessica's safety now, but for my son's, and I was leading them into a situation that could turn violent very quickly. "There's one more thing," Jessica said as we reached the service entrance. "If Brandon is willing to go this far to stop me from reaching the authorities, it means the evidence we found is even more damaging than I realized. He's not just trying to frame me for embezzlement anymore, he's trying to prevent me from exposing something bigger." As we stepped into the alley behind the bank, I realized that what had started as an attempt to talk someone off a bridge had evolved into something much more complex and dangerous. We weren't just fighting to clear Jessica's name anymore. We were fighting to expose a conspiracy that apparently reached further than any of us had imagined. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number as we crouched in the alley. "Turn around and walk away, soldier. This doesn't concern you." The message chilled me more than the October air. Brandon knew exactly who I was, had probably researched my military background the moment he realized I was involved. "They're trying to intimidate us," I whispered to Jessica, showing her the phone. "Which means they're scared of what we found." Tyler pointed toward the end of the alley where headlights were slowly approaching. "Dad, someone's coming." I made a split-second decision that would have made my old commanding officer proud. Instead of running, I pulled out my phone and started recording a video message. "My name is Mark Rodriguez, Army veteran. If something happens to us tonight, the evidence of Brandon Collins' crimes is in Safety Deposit Box 847 at First National Bank. Jessica Morrison is innocent." I sent the video to 3 different contacts, including my brother who worked for the county prosecutor's office. Sometimes the best defense is making sure the truth can't be buried with you. The approaching vehicle turned out to be a police cruiser, red and blue lights flashing silently. Officer Janet Meyer stepped out, someone I recognized from Tyler's school safety presentations. Behind her was Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI field office. "Mr. Rodriguez?" "Ms. Morrison. We received a call about suspicious activity in this area." Agent Chen's voice was professional but concerned. "We understand you may have information relevant to an ongoing federal investigation." Jessica stepped forward, clutching the manila folder of evidence against her chest. I have proof that Brandon Collins has been framing me for crimes he committed. Documents, photographs, bank records, everything you need to see the truth." Agent Chen examined the documents under the cruiser's interior light, while Officer Meyer kept watch on both ends of the alley. The federal agent's expression grew increasingly serious as she reviewed each piece of evidence. "Ms. Morrison, this changes everything. We'll need you to come with us immediately, but not as a suspect. We need your testimony to help us build a case against Mr. Collins and his associates." Agent Chen looked directly at me. "Mr. Rodriguez, your military service record indicates you understand operational security. We'll need you and your son to remain available for witness protection until we can arrest everyone involved in this conspiracy." 6 months later, I stood in the same spot on Memorial Bridge where I'd first encountered Jessica, watching Tyler and Jessica's daughter Emma play in the park below. The federal investigation had uncovered a network of corporate fraud that reached far beyond Morrison Tech, with Brandon Collins at the center of it all. Jessica had been completely exonerated, and Morrison Tech was being rebuilt under her leadership with new federal contracts and enhanced security protocols. More importantly, she'd found her purpose again, using her experience to help other victims of corporate fraud. "Penny, for your thoughts," Jessica said, joining me at the bridge railing where our lives had intersected that desperate October evening. "Just thinking about how different things could have been if Tyler hadn't insisted we stop that night," I replied, watching our children chase autumn leaves in the fading daylight. Jessica smiled, the genuine expression of someone who'd found peace after chaos. "Your son saved my life that night, but you saved my soul. You reminded me that some fights are worth having, even when victory seems impossible." Tyler ran up to us, breathless and grinning. "Dad, Emma wants to know if we can teach her how to skip stones at the harbor tomorrow." "I think that can be arranged," I said, ruffling his hair. "Heroes need hobbies, too." As we walked home together, I realized that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought on distant battlefields, but on ordinary bridges, where strangers become family and hope conquers despair. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.